Hello, welcome to the Daily News Currents. Today is Monday, September 30th, and for today's headlines, we have: in North Carolina, a race to provide relief amid an unprecedented tragedy. Republicans criticize Trump over his insults of Harris. Kris Kristofferson, country singer, songwriter, and actor, dies at 88. California Governor Newsom vetoes AI bill considered strictest in nation. It was like a circus, what Terry Crews learned from his NFL career. In North Carolina, a race to provide relief amid an unprecedented tragedy. Emergency workers are rescuing people from homes as they try to repair roads, power lines, and water systems. Helene has killed at least 37 people in the state and more than 90 overall. Raging floods and mudslides unleashed by the remnants of Hurricane Helene have dealt with unprecedented tragedy in the mountains of western North Carolina, leaving more than 30 people dead in the region and communities struggling to cope without power, cell service, water, and food. More than 400 miles from where it made landfall as a powerful hurricane, Helene has continued to wreak havoc across several states, with the death toll reaching more than 90 on Sunday. That toll could still rise as rescue workers reach stranded communities. Some of the worst devastation was in western North Carolina, where authorities were racing on Sunday to find victims and rescue people, deliver supplies to paralyzed towns, and restore damaged roads, cell phone towers, power lines, and water systems. In one hard-hit town, helicopters were dropping food from overhead at a church and a Harley-Davidson shop. North Carolina officials said more than 200 people have been rescued, including 119 people on Saturday by the National Guard. There were 45 search and rescue teams working, with help from 19 states and the federal government. Meanwhile, residents were scrambling to find basic necessities and cell service to reach family and friends. Although the exact number remains unclear, at least 37 people have died in storm-related deaths in the state so far, officials said, in what they called a historic disaster, and that number may still grow. This is an unprecedented tragedy that requires an unprecedented response, Governor Roy Cooper said at a news briefing on Sunday afternoon. In Buncombe County, North Carolina, which includes the devastated city of Asheville, Avril Pinder, the county manager, said that clear skies were helping search and rescue crews as they canvassed the area. "We are still trying to save every single person we can," she said. On Sunday afternoon, officials said that the number of unaccounted people have fallen below 600. Earlier, Ms. Pinder said they have received about 1,000 reports of people unable to find family members, but she said that some were duplicates and that she was confident the numbers would drop as communication systems were restored. It was common in the immediate aftermath of natural disasters that numbers of missing people swell as survivors become cut off from family members. For example, after a wildfire decimated the town of Lahaina in Maui last year, the list of missing included more than 1,000 names, while the final death toll was 102. I know that there's a lot of people who are concerned about relatives and friends they cannot get in touch with, and it's one of the reasons we are pushing so hard to get communications back up, because we know that a lot of people are just simply out of communication and are okay, Mr. Cooper said. Sheriff Quentin Miller of Buncombe County said he would not release the names of victims until family members can be notified, which has been difficult with communications down. "Our hearts are broken with this news," he said. "We ask that folks give our community the space and time to grieve this incredible loss." With reports that people have been waiting for hours-long lines for gas, with tensions rising and arguments breaking out, Sheriff Miller said he would order more deputies to patrol business districts to prevent looting. Mr. Cooper urged residents to stay off roads. Hundreds were still closed in the state, and said the state was urgently trying to get supplies to affected areas and would be setting up mass feeding sites. In many communities, the water systems were shut down due to power outages and infrastructure damage, and residents were urged to boil water or use bottled water if they could find it. In Weaverville, near Asheville, for example, the water plant was damaged by 8 feet of rainwater, said Patrick Fitzsimons, the town's mayor. Officials in Asheville say that restoring the full system could take weeks. Mr. Fitzsimmons added that there was no water available in the community, either from shops or in people's homes, and that roads were blocked by downed trees and power lines. One of the only businesses opened on Sundays was a pharmacy, he said, where residents could use the drive-through window to pick up prescriptions. Meanwhile, in Swanona, where helicopters were dropping supplies, there were complete neighborhoods that are no longer there, said Anthony Penland, the chief of Swanona's fire department. He said that a section of the main highway was gone and that a key bridge would need to be repaired, which has been hampering his search and rescue teams. Republicans criticized Trump over his insults of Harris. Several Republicans distanced themselves from their party's standard bearer after he called Vice President Kamala Harris mentally disabled. Former President Donald J. Trump drew criticism from several fellow Republicans on Sunday for his demeaning insults of Vice President Kamala Harris, a day after he called her mentally disabled and mentally impaired at a rally. Senator Lindsey Graham, a South Carolina Republican, pushed back on Mr. Trump's remarks on Sunday. "I just think the better course to take is to prosecute the case that her policies are destroying the country," Mr. Graham said on CNN, adding that he did not think Ms. Harris was crazy, but did think her policies were. Representative Tom Emmer, a Minnesota Republican who has been helping Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, Mr. Trump's running mate, prepare for his upcoming debate, also sought to distance himself from Mr. Trump's personal attacks. "I think we should stick to the issues," Mr. Emmer said on ABC News. Larry Hogan, a former Republican governor of Maryland who is currently running for Senate, offered a sharper rebuke. "I think that's insulting not only to the vice president, but to people that actually do have mental disabilities," Mr. Hogan, who has often criticized Mr. Trump in the past, said on CBS News. "I've said for years that Trump's divisive rhetoric is something we can do without." Stephen Chung, the communication director for the Trump campaign, did not directly address Mr. Trump's insults or the critical responses they had prompted. He instead argued that Ms. Harris' record on immigration and border security made her wholly unfit to serve as president. In a statement, Mr. Chung added, "Her abhorrent deregulation of duty at the border allowed criminals to pour into our country to terrorize communities." Mr. Trump has made personal attacks against Ms. Harris, even as some campaign advisors and Republican allies have urged him to stick to bread-and-butter policy issues that appeal to large swaths of voters. He has often demeaned her and questioned her racial identity, but at a rally in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, on Saturday, he escalated those attacks with a series of insults questioning her mental fitness. "Joe Biden became mentally impaired," Mr. Trump said. "Kamala was born that way." Mr. Trump's remarks, which he himself described as dark, came a day after Ms. Harris delivered one of her party's toughest speeches in a generation on immigration and border security. Mr. Trump repeated some of the insults at a rally Sunday afternoon in Erie, Pennsylvania, saying, "There's something wrong with Kamala." Democrats also seized on his comments. Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois criticized Mr. Trump's remarks as name-calling on CNN. "Whenever he says things like that, he's talking about himself, but trying to project onto others," Mr. Pritzker said. Eric Holder, the former Attorney General who served in the Obama administration, went further, suggesting that Mr. Trump's comments indicated cognitive decline. "Mr. Trump made a great deal of the cognitive abilities of Joe Biden," Mr. Holder said on MSNBC. "If this is where he is now, where is he going to be 3 or 4 years from now?" After Mr. Trump's remarks on Saturday, the Harris campaign declined to comment on his personal attacks. A campaign spokeswoman, Serafina Chiquita, said in a statement that Mr. Trump offered darkness to voters rather than inspiration. Just hours after Mr. Trump made the remarks, Saturday Night Live was joking about them as it opened its 50th season. "I can't believe that Trump admitted he lost the debate to a mentally disabled person," Colin Jost said on the show's Weekend Update segment. The American Association of People with Disabilities, a nonpartisan advocacy group, criticized Mr. Trump's comments as both inaccurate and harmful. Trump holds the ableist false belief that if a person has a disability, they are less human and less worthy of dignity, Maria Town, the group's president and chief executive, said in a statement. "Presidential history indicates that we've had many presidents who had disabilities." Kris Kristofferson, country singer, songwriter, and actor, dies at 88. He wrote songs for hundreds of other artists, including Me and Bobby McGee for Janis Joplin and Sunday Morning Coming Down for Johnny Cash, before a second act in film. Kris Kristofferson, the singer and songwriter who literary yet plain-spoken compositions like Me and Bobby McGee and Help Me Make It Through the Night infused country music with rarely heard candor and depth, and who later had a successful second career in movies, died at his home in Maui, Hawaii on Saturday. He was 88. The death was announced by Ebby McFarlane, a spokeswoman who did not give a cause. Hundreds of artists have recorded Mr. Christopherson's songs, from Al Green and the Grateful Dead to Michael Bublé and Gladys Knights and the Pips. Mr. Christopherson breakthrough as a songwriter came with For the Good Times, a bittersweet ballad that topped the country chart and reached the pop top 40 for Ray Price in 1970. His Sunday Morning Coming Down became a #1 country hit for his friend and mentor Johnny Cash later that year. Mr. Cash memorably intoned the song's indelible opening couplet. Well, I woke up on Sunday morning with no way to hold my head that didn't hurt, and the beer I had for breakfast wasn't bad. So I had more for dessert. Expressing more than just the malaise of someone suffering from a hangover, Sunday Morning Coming Down gives voice to feelings of spiritual abandonment that border on the absolute. Nothing short of dying is the way the song's chorus describes the desolation its protagonist is experiencing. Steeped in new romantic sensibility that owned as much as to John Keats as to the Beat Generation and Bob Dylan, Mr. Christopherson work explored themes of freedom and commitment, alienation and desire, darkness and light. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Nothing ain't worth nothing but it's free, he wrote in Me and Bobby McGee. Janis Joplin, with whom Mr. Christopherson was previously involved romantically, had a posthumous #1 single with her plaintive recording of the song in 1971. Later that year, Help Me Make It Through the Night became a #1 country and top 10 pop hit in a heart-stopping performance by Sammy Smith. The competition won Mr. Christopherson a Grammy Award for Country Song of the Year in 1972. It was a heady time to be a songwriter in Nashville, where Mr. Christopherson fell in the gifted circle of like-minded and similarly Batch-alien tunesmiths who were driven to succeed as he was, Roger Miller and Willie Nelson among them. We took it seriously enough to think our work was important, to think that what we were creating would mean something in the bigger picture, Mr. Christopherson said in an interview with the magazine No Depression in 2006. Looking back on it, I feel like it was kind of our Paris in the 20s, he went on, alluding to the American expats writers like Ernest Hemingway and Gertrude Stein, who lived there at the time. Real creative and real exciting and intense. Mr. Christopherson's own raspy, at times pitch-indifferent vocals never quite gained traction with commercial radio. One notable exception was the gospel-suffused Why Me, a #1 country and top 40 pop hit released on the Momentum label in 1973. Another gospel song of his, One Day at a Time, written by Marjan Wilkin, was a #1 country single for the singer Christy Lane in 1980. Mr. Christopherson is survived by his wife, Lisa, 8 children, Tracy, Chris Jr., Casey, Jesse, Jody, John, Kelly, and Blake, and 7 grandchildren. California Governor Newsom vetoes AI bill considered strictest in the nation. Governor Gavin Newsom of California on Sunday vetoed a bill that would have enacted the nation's most far-reaching regulations on the booming artificial intelligence industry. California's legislators overwhelmingly passed the bill, called SB 1047, which was seen as a potential blueprint for national AI legislation. The measure would have made tech companies legally liable for harms caused by AI models. In addition, the bill would have required tech companies to enable a kill switch for AI technology in the event the systems were misused or went rogue. Newsom, in a statement, described the bill as well-intentioned, but noted that its requirements would have called for stringent regulations that would have been onerous for the state's leading artificial intelligence companies. In his statement, Newsom said the bill focused too much on the biggest and most powerful AI models, saying smaller upstarts could prove to be just as disruptive. Smaller, specialized models may emerge as equally or even more dangerous than the models targeted by SB 1047, at the potential expense of curtailing the very innovation that fuels advancement in favor for the public good, Newsom wrote. California Senator Scott Weiner, a co-author of the bill, criticized Newsom's move, saying the veto is a setback for artificial intelligence accountability. This veto leaves with the troubling reality that companies aiming to create an extremely powerful technology face no binding restrictions from U.S. policymakers, particularly given Congress's continually paralysis around regulating the tech industry in any meaningful way, Weiner wrote on X. The now-killed bill would have forced the industry to conduct safety tests on massively powerful AI models. Without such requirements, Weiner wrote on Sunday, the industry is left policing itself. While the large AI labs have made admirable commitments to monitor and mitigate these risks, the truth is that the voluntary commitments from industry are not enforceable and rarely work out well for the public. Many powerful players in Silicon Valley, including venture capitalist firm Andreessen Horowitz, OpenAI, and trade groups representing Google and Meta, lobbied against the bill, arguing it would slow the development of AI and stifle growth for early-stage companies. SB 1047 would threaten that growth, slow the pace of innovation, and lead California's world-class engineers and entrepreneurs to leave the state in search of greater opportunity elsewhere. OpenAI's Chief Strategy Officer Jason Kwan wrote in a letter sent last month to Weiner. Other tech companies, however, backed the bill, including Elon Musk and pioneering AI scientists like Geoffrey Hinton and Yosha Bengio, who signed a letter urging Newsom to sign it. We believe that the most powerful AI models may soon pose severe risk, such as expanded access to biological weapons and cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. It is feasible and appropriate to frontier AI companies to test whether the most powerful AI models can cause severe harms, and for those companies to implement reasonable safeguards against such risk, wrote Hilton and dozens of former and current employees of leading AI companies. California State Senator Scott Weiner called the veto a setback in a post on X for everyone who believes in oversight of massive corporations that are making critical decisions that affect the safety and welfare of the public. Other states like Colorado and Utah have enacted laws more narrowly tailored to address how AI could perpetuate bias in employment and healthcare decisions, as well as other AI-related consumer protection concerns. Newsom has recently signed other AI bills into law, including one to crack down on the spread of deepfakes during elections. Another protects actors against their likeness being replicated by AI without their consent. As billions of dollars pour into the development of AI and it permeates more corners of everyday life, lawmakers in Washington still have not proposed a single piece of federal legislation to protect people from its potential harms, nor to provide insight of its rapid development. It was like a circus, what Terry Crews learned from his NFL career. A note from Wildcard host Rachel Martin. I cry easily, I always have, but I'm a specific kind of crier, the kind that is easily manipulated by TV producers. The fast track to a good cry for me is reality talent show. They are so good at getting you sucked into the contestant's backstory, and I have to say that America's Got Talent is top for me right now because they've got something none of the other shows have. Terry Crews. Crews is the host of the show, and there is just something about the way he cheers for these contestants that gets me every time. When one of them is getting ready to go out on stage and they're nervous, and he tells them that he loves them, I don't think it's fake. He's already invested in them. He wants them to shine. I think in that moment, he does love them. It's sort of a bizarre role for a guy who used to knock people to the ground as a linebacker in the NFL. And sure, we all contain multitudes, but Crews is more multitudinous than most. You know, the guy actually went to college on an art scholarship? Football wasn't for him, and long story short, he became an actor. He's been in tons of movies, including cult favorites White Chicks and Idiocracy. He's co-starred in the comedy series Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Everybody Hates Chris, which is getting an animated reboot on Comedy Central. And yeah, he's the guy cheering for you just behind the curtain when you're about to do a really hard thing. That's how I like to think of him anyway. Question 1. What's something a parent figure taught you to appreciate? My mother always told me before she passed, she said, Terry, never forget you're an artist. Number 1, before everything, you're an artist. And that has colored everything I've ever done. It's probably one of the most beneficial pieces of advice I've ever received, because when you do things as an artist, it transcends. Like you can mow the lawn, but when you mow the lawn like an artist, you become a landscaper. You know what I mean? Totally. That's your palette, that's your easel, that's your blank canvas. Yeah, one thing I've discovered is that focus and interest create energy. And that's what art does, because you're always focusing on something very interesting. And people will look at it and be very bored. Like, what are you doing? You know? Like some sculpture or some painting or some drawing. But that focus energizes you. It's like making the mundane magnificent. When did you start drawing? Like, how did that even come about to you? Well, my mom was very religious. I was not allowed to do a lot of things. My friends could go to the movies, but I couldn't when I was young. Movies were the devil's things. Now she came out of that later, but the first 12 years of my life, it was like that. So what happened was kids would talk about the movies they saw, and I would go home and draw what they described. I would draw what Jaws may look like. I would spend hours and hours just drawing. I'll never forget, when I was a kid, especially on weekends, I could draw all night long. I would just be drawing, and all of a sudden I'd look up and someone would be coming up. Like, that's how focused I was. Question 2. What was a disappointing experience that now feels like a blessing? I guess the NFL. My whole 7 years in the NFL I would call a disappointment because I was all over the place. I was on 6 teams in 7 years, all with my wife and 2 kids at the same time. We didn't know what was going on, and everyone thinks that sports are so glamorous or whatever. It just wasn't. It was a grind. It was like a circus. My wife and I did not know what was going to happen to us next year. Like, we had no idea. It was a disappointment because I wanted championships. I wanted to be a star, and it all ended unceremoniously when I got cut for the last time. That was the hardest thing. There's a depression that came with it. But when I look back, what a blessing, because it got me ready for entertainment. It got me ready for the audition process. Because every time you walk into an audition room, you don't know what's going to happen. They could be like, you're not for us, and you've got to get over that. Yeah, like lobsters do a thing called molting. When they outgrow the shell, and they're vulnerable, but their shells regrows bigger. And I've said, I'm like this. I'm molting. Like what happens when you're growing. You break the shell, and it's painful. And the NFL was a version of me molting into a new person. I have the weirdest visual in my mind right now, like of this little naked lobster, and it's like so scared of what's going to happen. That's us. We're all little naked lobsters right now, but we're growing our shell, and you have to do that to grow. Question 3. Where have you experienced awe? Oh man, when I went to Iceland to do Bear Grylls' show, Running with the Bear Grylls. They took us on a helicopter up to this mountain, on top of a volcano, and dropped us off there. Then the helicopter flies away. I'm hanging on the side of this mountain. I'm trying not to fall because it's really dangerous. I'm going, oh, they weren't kidding. And I see his camera crew is doing it backwards. And I'm like, how? What? The sound man and camera guy are hanging on the side of the mountain. Wait, that was your moment of awe? When you saw the crew? That was it. I was going, how the hell are you doing this, man? I thought you were going to talk about the sacred nature of the fjords that you saw. Oh, no. I want to mention Bear Grylls' crew. They left me in awe. I was like, what? You guys are superheroes. What are you doing? Now, mind you, after filming, I did get to sleep at the base of this volcano, and that was my nature awe moment. I had never done anything like that in my life. And you're in Iceland. There's no streetlights or nothing. It's just pow. You see galaxies, You're laying there looking up, and you're going to fall in. I felt so small, where you're like, oh my God, the world is gigantic. And does that make you feel unsettled or good to feel small in the universe? It makes me feel good. I feel grounded. Here I am, laying in the dirt. I'm part of this, I just feel awe about the power that's out there and all the things I don't know. I was filled with awe. And that's all we have today. Thank you so much for listening.